Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I do hope you're doing remarkably well. I'm doing great, thank you very much, and I send you all a lovely big hug, and I hope you've had a lovely day and are ready to wind down to listen to a fabulous story. So we are now on part 3 of our story tonight. So let's continue, shall we? And if you haven't heard the first 2 parts of the story, please click on the description. So let's get started. How would you feel, Malachi, if you can't persuade someone not to jump? She had asked him, taking a large bite of her buttered roll and studying Malachi through narrowed eyes. The police have warned me about such things, said Malachi. I guess I'll just have to take it in my stride, won't I? There are always going to be some people that no matter what you do or what you say, they don't want to be helped. That's true, said Wendy. You must remember, Malachi, that there are so many you did save, so you mustn't feel guilty if you don't succeed in preventing all of them from jumping over the cliff. And you must never ever pull them away yourself, because they could drag you down with them. You do know that, don't you? Sometimes when you try to rescue a drowning person, in their desperate panic, the person you're trying to save inadvertently drags you down, so that you drown as well. The same rule, I imagine, applies with jumpers. That's what the police told me, said Malachi. It's one of the cardinal rules. You cannot pull people away from the cliff, because they could take you down with them if they really want to jump. And that would mean that there are 2 lives lost, not just 1. It's this ghost ship that intrigues me, said Wendy. I've heard all about it, and I personally don't believe for a moment that it's a legend. Leonora laughed a musical laugh. They broke the mould when they made you, Wendy. I do love the fact that you're a believer in all these fictitious things. But don't go filling my daughter's head with your crazy ideas. That's the last thing that Hannah needs. I want you 2 kids to be very careful. I don't like the idea of you messing around on the edge of the cliff, especially in the middle of the night. Up here in the cliff house the winds can be quite boisterous, you know, and it would be very easy to be swept over the edge and meet a very unfortunate end. And you wouldn't want that to happen, would you? You must take these legends, I'm afraid, Wendy, with a pinch of salt. They're probably tales, you know, passed down through many generations that got exaggerated over the years along the way, just to make a story all the more exciting. But it doesn't mean it's actually true. You must bear that in mind, Wendy. I will, Leonora, said Wendy, giving Hannah a meaningful wink, her bright green eyes full of anticipation. Hannah knew that Wendy was not about to listen to her mother's well-meaning advice. Wendy would never follow rules that were meant to be broken. Wendy had not come here to the cliff house to ignore the legends that abounded about the ghost ship, just because Leonora had sceptical reservations that such things even existed. Some people could be so closed-minded, their rigid opinions of the world almost set in stone. Wendy had found this particularly applied to intellectuals, like both of her parents, who were both scientists who believed only in the world that they could physically see, that revolved around math and science. They thought they knew so much, but in Wendy's opinion, they knew very little. How they had given birth to such an inquiring daughter who continuously thought outside the box was an enigmatic conundrum to both of them. When they said as much to Wendy, she told them, I think I came into your lives to set the cat among the pigeons. Her father had said to her, You're not wrong about that, Wendy dear. You do know how to stir the pot like no one I know. I'm constantly being challenged by your bizarre questions that are impossible to answer at times. That's why I came into your lives, Wendy had laughed. I keep the 2 of you on your toes. Personally, her father had said, I like it when my feet are firmly on solid ground. I never had any inclination to become a ballet dancer, you know, he had teased. At least Wendy's parents both had a great sense of humour, and she loved the bones of both of them, but their views of the paranormal were very dismissive. Could they not appreciate that energy lives on forever, Wendy had thought. Look at a boiling kettle, for example. It becomes steam and then evaporates. But she kept these thoughts to herself. The previous day both girls had met up with an old man on the beach, who had lived in these parts all his life, and what he had to tell them made both teenagers bubble over with an ebullient excitement that was hard to suppress. Hannah loved Wendy Kudrow, because when her friend was around, things happened that she never dreamed remotely possible. Doors seemed to just swing open without even a squeak or a groan. She was a mover and shaker in an unorthodox way. Every morning Hannah had got up early, especially on the weekends, to take a vigorous walk along the beach, but she had never once encountered this old man. Even if she had, she'd lightly have given him a smile and trotted off along her way, and not giving him a second thought. But Wendy was interested in absolutely everyone. She saw the old man like an ancient manuscript that contained so much information, who had a story to tell, and one she was eager to hear. Older people had done so much living, and many of them had stories inside them that needed to be coaxed out. "Hi!" she said, running up to the old man and dropping to her knees on the beach sand to cuddle his red cocker spaniel. The dog's colour was fading. His long ears had turned a very pale auburn colour, suggesting that she was quite old. But the bewildered dog seemed to thoroughly enjoy the fuss she was receiving from this perfect stranger. "She's beautiful," said Wendy enthusiastically, stroking the dog and staring up at the old man with animated green eyes. "I love dogs. She's beautiful. How old is she?" "She's a he," said the old man, laughing. "His name is Scott. I think in his dog years he's almost as old as I am," he chuckled. "We're both embracing the last season of our lives, I'm afraid. I'm in my 90s, you know. It seems like only the other day that I was your age. A word of warning, young lady. The time goes by very fast. So enjoy being young, because it's not going to last for very long. Believe me, before you know it, you'll be hobbling down this beach like I am and saying, 'Where did the time get to?' I ask myself that every day, you know. Life is unfortunately very short. So word of advice, make the most of every single minute." "You sound exactly like my dad. He says the very same thing," said Wendy. "But that is old. Very old. Are you really 90? "I am indeed. I wouldn't say it if I wasn't," chuckled the old man. "Don't look so shocked. I'll have you know that 90 is not really that old in the grand scheme of things. But to a young lass like yourself, I do appreciate that I must seem like an ancient relic to you," he teased. "I like ancient relics," said Wendy. "They're much more interesting than modern stuff. If you don't mind my saying, you look very fit for your age," she said unabashedly. She turned around to Hannah. "He doesn't look like he's 90, does he, Hannah?" "No, you don't, sir. You look great for your age." It was true. The man looked old, but she would never have guessed he was in his 90s. He was wearing a navy blue fisherman's tight-knit sweater with leather patches on the elbows and on the collar, with a matching pair of chinos. He looked quite smart and debonair, far too smart to be walking along a beach. But then again, Wendy had always noticed that the older generation could be very set in their ways when it came to their appearance. The man did not know the meaning of the word scruffy. She noticed that wisps of his flyaway grey hair were firmly anchored down by a tweed cap. His weathered skin clung tightly to his skull, so that his bones protruded. His skin was crinkled like wax paper that you've scrunched up in your hands. He stared warmly at the two girls, with merriment in his blue eyes. Wendy wished with all her heart that she was a seasoned artist, for she would have loved to have painted this man on canvas. She liked him at once, and true to form she was completely direct with the stranger, having no fear or misgivings about how he might possibly react to her outlandish question, which was coming next. Wendy never concerned herself with being controversial, no matter where she was. "Have you heard about the legend of the ghost ship, sir? Often seen in these parts, I believe." The old man's twinkling eyes appeared to pop out of their sockets like two bright blue marbles, and his face grew animated. Wendy knew at once. The subject of the ghost ship had lit up a spark in the old man's eyes, and was a topic of great interest that he was well acquainted with. But she had not anticipated, in all a month of Sundays. But what he said next, Wendy had never anticipated in an entire month of Sundays.
"Yes, I have seen the ghost ship before, as it happens. And what an incredible sight it was, too,"
he said wistfully, his steely blue eyes staring out at the ocean, as if caught up in a nostalgic memory that almost brought tears to his eyes. He turned around to the girls and said,
"Never seen anything like that before or since. Most incredible thing these old eyes of mine have ever beheld. Why don't you come back to the house with me and meet my wife Maggie? She'll prepare us a lovely cup of tea, and I will tell you all about it. But before we go, I don't need you to address me as Sir. That's not necessary. My name is Bert Goodfellow, and it's a pleasure to meet you both."
"It's a pleasure to meet you, Bert," said Wendy, unable to disguise her enthusiasm. "I can't believe that you've actually seen the ghost ship. I knew it wasn't a legend."
"It's certainly not a legend," said Bert.
The two teenagers looked at each other and the old man in bewilderment, unable to believe their good fortune. They had met someone who had witnessed the ghost ship in person, so it wasn't a spurious legend after all. Hannah could feel her heart fluttering excitedly in her chest, like a flapping pigeon. This was a story she was bursting to hear. They followed Bert Goodfellow back to his humble beachside home that he and his wife had bought in the 1950s. It was in a prime position close to the beach, and was not at all fancy. "Maggie!" came Bert's voice when he entered the house, through the screen door that was swinging on its hinges. The old man fastidiously wiped his sandy shoes on the outside mat, and the girls did the same.
"Look what the cat dragged in, Maggie. I found these two urchins on the beach along with the seaweed," he said, his blue eyes sparkling. "You'll never believe me what they were asking about, Maggie. They want to know all about the Swanepoel. You know, the ghost ship I saw about 20 years ago."
A sweet old lady came bustling into the living room very suddenly, her cornflower blue eyes studying Hannah and Wendy curiously. She was wearing a blue and green tweed skirt, with a green cashmere sweater, and a string of Tiffany pearls around her neck. She had thick white cropped hair, cut in a short fashionable hairstyle that made her appear younger than she actually was. But the road map of lands on her face made her so endearing, as if she had a lifetime of stories to tell, much like her husband Bert.
"My, this is a treat to have such young visitors with us today," she said. "You've made my husband's day. Talking about the Swanepoel, that is. I want to tell you, for as long as I've been married to the old bugger here, he talks about nothing else. So to have an interested audience, you've made his day. I've been married to the old codger for more years than I can care to remember, you know, and this man of mine, as incorrigible as he is, can talk the skin off a horse if given the chance. Now give me your overcoats. I'll hang them up on the hooks for you in the entrance hall. And how about I make us a lovely cup of tea?" she said. "I find everything is so much better after a cup of tea. I think there's quite a breeze blowing out there today. I know they say it's spring, but here in the Oregon coast, winter seems to have a very long memory."
Bert led the two teenagers into a very cosy kitchen that looked in a way as if it was stuck in a 1950s time warp. It had a wood-burning stove on, and pale green kitchen cupboards, and green and white gingham curtains, Both teenagers found it oddly comforting, as if they were being taken back in time. The vintage look of the kitchen had become trendy in some eclectic magazines of late, so in a way the outmoded kitchen had probably crept back into fashion.
"You haven't had tea," said Bert, "until you've tasted my Maggie's tea. She was born in Ireland, you know. She doesn't know the meaning of the word moderation. You may not believe it, but once upon a time I had a very big gut that would hang over my pants, because I couldn't stop eating all my wife's amazing food. I think that's why I married her, you know. I fell in love with her hearty fare. These days I don't eat like I did back then, which is why my gut disappeared." "Don't listen to him," said Maggie. "I was quite a bonny lass back in the day, you know. But he'll never admit to that. Will you, dear?" she said, winking at the teenagers.
Hannah and Wendy had never had such an incredible spread before, as Maggie spread out a lace tablecloth over the walnut kitchen table. She vigorously set to work, preparing them tea, with thin cucumber and salmon sandwiches, scones with dollops of jam and clotted cream, slices of the most delicious, delectable lemon-drizzle cake, hazelnut and chocolate torte, and big slices of cheese and bacon quiche. It was quite the magnificent spread, and both teenagers, their eyes stood up on stalks, for they had never had tea like this before. Wasn't this the sort of thing you got in some glamorous hotel, like at Tiffany's? Maybe Bertie really had married Maggie for her cooking. She was so old, but still cooking like the quintessential domestic goddess. She served her tea with shaking hands, in delicate china periwinkle teacups, while Bert proceeded to tell them all about the ghost ship that he called the Swaniple. Bert's eyes became so clouded with emotion that Wendy was scared he was going to burst into tears, but he didn't. Instead, he talked about that night 20 years ago, when he'd seen the ghost ship for himself.
"Of course I'd heard about the ghost ship before. I mean, many legends abounded about ghost ships in these parts. I mean, there were so many shipwrecks around here in the day. Believe you me, many a life was lost out to sea. It was very tragic. I do know my father saw a ghost ship once, along with a friend of his. He'd say to me, 'Son, if you want to see something badly enough, you mark my words, you will see it, you will draw it to yourself, like a light to a candle wick.' Of course, he was absolutely right. I think my father was roughly about 12 or 15 when he first saw the ghost ship. I wanted to believe him. My father was a man of great integrity. He would have no reason to make a story like this up. For many years as a kid, I would climb out of my bedroom window and creep out in the middle of the night to walk down the stretch of beach, hoping with all my heart to catch a glimpse of the Swaniple, which was the ship my father and his friends saw on one spring night many, many years ago. The Swaniple was a ship that sank on this stretch of coastline, I think. The ship hit a treacherous outcrop of rocks. Many a ship got wrecked out in these parts. It was treacherous back in its day, and goodness gracious me, I can't imagine how many souls were lost at sea. My father, well, he never had an imagination. In fact, he was dreadful like that, so I knew he had indeed seen what he claimed to have seen. And his friend, who I knew very well, never ever stopped talking about it. He kept saying, "I can't believe I saw that ship. Sometimes it feels just like a dream." Even when I got married to Maggie, I never ever tired of searching for that ship. I would get up very early in the morning, at about 1 o'clock, which is roughly about the time when the ship was spotted. But I never saw a thing, did I, dear? Maggie nodded her head between a mouthful of scone and jam. "Well, you know, I always thought all this stuff and nonsense about a ghost ship was absolute hocus-pocus. I didn't want to let Bert down, by telling him how I felt, because he was so eager to see this ghost ship. But I did doubt that it was real. But no, Bert did not see a thing for years, and personally I wasn't surprised. He'd go out onto the beach, especially when it was spring, when his father had spotted the ship. But he'd return home with his heart heavy, and I never had to ask him, "Did you see the Swanepoel, love?" Because I knew, just by looking at him, that he hadn't seen a thing. My heart would break for him, because I wanted him to see it badly. I wanted to believe that it actually existed. Believe it or not, I'd actually pray every night, asking God that he'd see the ghost ship. After a while, I guess my husband just gave up looking for the Swanepoel. And in a way, I thought my prayers had been answered, because I thought it didn't exist. He's a very deep sleeper, you know. You continue, love, with the story. I don't want to steal your thunder, said Maggie, glancing at her husband fondly, with the devotion of a woman whom had been on the bumpy journey of life by her husband's side all the way. And Hannah privately thought that she hoped she'd find a love like that one day. The couple were like a pair of old, very comfortable slippers that belonged together. Bert wiped the crumbs away from his mouth, and then with his bright, excited eyes, he told them his story, the words unable to restrain themselves from bursting out of his mouth. His enthusiasm was infectious. One night I woke up with a start, almost as if someone was poking me in the chest. I actually thought Maggie was trying to get my attention over something. I turned around to look at her, but to my amazement she was sound asleep, so she hadn't attempted to wake me up, but it felt as if someone had. I immediately got up, feeling rather bewildered and confounded. I went to the kitchen to get a glass of milk, and when I entered the kitchen, I saw in the distance on the horizon, through the misty fog over the ocean, what I can only describe as a strange, airy, bluish glow. I was wearing my blue and white striped dressing gown at the time. My feet were bare. I had nothing on my feet. It was a cool spring night, not much different to the weather we've been having of late. As you know, our house is just not very far from the beach. So I thrust open the door and bolted towards the beach. Could I dare to hope that I might be catching sight of the Swanepoel? What was that strange, bluish, ghost-like glow above the water? I do vividly recall my own father describing when he saw the Swanepoel, a strange mist hovering above the water with a bluish glow. So I will say this, my hopes were beginning to escalate, and I ran to the beach as fast as I could, and when I stood on the beach, my whole body trembled with excitement. I was quite literally shaking like a leaf. I remember the soft, pearly moon peppering the beach, and there was something outer-worldly about the experience. There was a white mist hovering above the water, with a strange, bluish, ethereal light that seemed to perforate the mist, and then the mist began to evaporate. It almost folded away in a spiral of what I can only describe as wispy smoke. And that was when I saw the old ship, with its 3 white masts and large square sails, and a small triangular sail at the bow. On one of the large sails was the word Swanepoel. The ship was wooden, with those fancy curls that you see on those old Viking ships. It looked like the kind of ship you would see in your history books. Its sails were whipping wildly in the wind, and the feeling I got was I was watching the effect of something being replayed in our history. Then I heard the disembodied screams. I could hear people crying out, "Help! Help!" And then I watched the ship beginning to sink. And then nothing. Everything went eerily still. It was haunting. It sent chills down my spine. My skin began to prickle. My father had never told me about those disembodied screams, of the poor people on board the ship that sadly went down to their watery graves. I've never forgotten that. But it was magnificent to see that ship gliding across the ocean, this stretch of coastline, where there are some treacherous rocks. The ship must have struck something. It went down so very quickly, and I remember pinching myself and saying, "Did that really happen, Bert? Did that really happen?" But it did. I sat there on the beach for an entire hour and meditated on what I had seen, unable to believe that I had been witness to the Swanepoel.
Maggie, on seeing how emotional her husband was becoming, speedily took over the conversation.
"Well, my husband, he came into the bedroom and got into bed after he'd been on the beach. And he didn't try to wake me up. I remember peering at him from beneath my covers. He was breathing furiously fast, staring at the wall in a trance-like state. And you know what? In that moment, I knew Bert had seen the Swanepoel. I said to him, 'Oh my God, you saw the Swanepoel, didn't you, Bert?' And do you know, tears just poured down my husband's cheeks. He looked at me and nodded. 'I felt so helpless,' he said to me. 'How can I rescue the souls of those who have long since passed away?' It was chilling, but at the same time, he said it was incredibly beautiful, and he was so glad he had been witness to something so spectacular."
Hannah and Wendy thanked the Goodfellows for telling them such an incredible story, and when they returned back home after tea with them, Wendy was very excited. "You heard Bert for yourself," she said. "He said that the Swanepoel was seen in spring at about 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'm spending the next 2 weeks with you. Let's go down to the beach very early every morning and see if we can spot it." Hannah was less than enthusiastic. "I 100% believe that Bert saw the ghost ship, but get real. He had been looking for that ship for years. He hasn't ever seen it again, has he? I think we'll be chasing after the wind. We won't be able to spot it." "Don't be so defeatist, Hannah," said Wendy, sounding annoyed. "That's the problem with people these days. It's the problem with our country and our society. It's too much like hard work. I can't be bothered. Let's just give up. That's the attitude of most people these days. I mean, let's face it, if you have a stinking attitude like that, of course you're never going to see a thing. You heard what Bert's father said. If you want something badly enough, you'll draw it to you like light to a candle wick. I won't forget that saying in a hurry, because it's true." Hannah was easily persuaded by Wendy's spirited enthusiasm, but after several nights of facing icy cold gusts of wind and staggering precariously down the long iron staircase to the beach below, it had not been a pretty experience for Hannah, but she didn't want to let her best friend down. In the mornings the two teenagers would sleep in late, but luckily Leonora believed teenagers would sleep their lives away if given the chance. She was obliviously unaware of her teenagers' nocturnal activities, although Chester was becoming suspicious. "What the hell are you two getting up to?
sneaking off in the dead of night?" he asked his sister. "Mum would do her nut if she knew what you were doing." He swung his arms in the air in an exaggerated gesture of mocking humiliation, as if making fun of the two girls. Let me guess. You're convinced you're going to see a ghost ship? Ha! Give me a break. You're so gullible, the both of you. Your enthusiasm is impressive, I will admit. But honestly, you're not going to see anything like that. The rumours about the ghost ship are that. Just rumours, just like Mum said. They're legends. Besides, if you want my humble opinion, it's dangerous going out of the cliff house at night. It would be easy to be blown over the cliff. It's dangerous. You hear me?
"Oh, stop being so defeatist," said Wendy, pulling a face at Hannah's brother. "Honestly, you're so naive because you're so closed-minded. You're such a wet blanket, Chester. My parents are a couple of crusty cynics who, very much like you, don't believe in anything that they can't see, not even in God. We don't need this from you." And with that, the two teenagers had stormed away defiantly, feeling all the more resolutely determined to continue with their nocturnal activities. If the truth be told, Hannah was beginning to doubt that she and Wendy would see anything, but Wendy was one of those people that did not entertain the word doubt. And so every morning, like clockwork, at a godless hour, Wendy would be dragging Hannah out of bed, kicking and screaming if needs must. Hannah should not have doubted the girl that always made things happen, as Wendy would never disappoint. For some reason, Wendy could open closed doors that were bolted shut for everybody else. One morning, when a cantankerous, reckless wind wailed outside the house, so that the windows rattled and the whole house seemed to almost wobble and shake, Wendy shook Hannah out of bed, and on this ominous morning, Hannah was resistant to her friend's spirited nudges. She was so exhausted and completely embroiled in a pleasurable dream. "Get up, Hannah! We need to go down to the beach," Hannah groaned. "I'm so tired, Wendy. I'm exhausted," she complained obsequiously. "Let's forget it this morning, just for once. Can't we go tomorrow night? The weather out there, it's dreadful tonight. The wind is fierce. It's dangerous to go out there at this time." "Get up, Hannah," said Wendy, not taking no for an answer, becoming like a formidable army sergeant issuing orders without apology, and being completely immune to any of Hannah's protestations. The kind of person you'd love to hate in the military. Wendy, knowing that Hannah was being particularly sluggish this morning, knew she needed assistance, so she promptly poured a jug of icy-cold water over Hannah's face. The water trailed down her cheeks and her chest, saturating her pyjama top. Hannah jumped up from her bed with a start, looking furious at Wendy. "I'm soaked! Look what you've done! I'm totally wet! Why did you do that? I've got to change from my PJs. They're saturated." She glowered. "Good! I'm glad they're soaked, because we need to get changed. We're going to the beach. One day you'll thank me, Hannah, for waking you up." The two girls, after putting on jeans, windbreakers and sneakers, tiptoed cautiously out of the house. But the wind outside the door was so fearsome that even if they'd thundered around the house, their noise would have been masked by the flamboyant, treacherous weather outside. Hannah did not like embracing a whirling wind like this, especially when their house was nestled on top of a cliff. But she bit her lip and said nothing. She knew that Wendy would show her little sympathy. Hannah's heart pounded in her chest violently as she grabbed the guardrail of the steps, set high in the cliff, that led a long way down to the beach. Thank goodness high tide was still 2.5 hours away, but the wind was roaring and thrusting its ungainly hands all over her and throwing her around indiscriminately, like a plastic bag in the wind. Hannah held tightly onto the bars for dear life, carefully treading down, one step at a time, terrified that one slip and she'd fall to her death. Both girls diligently wore headlamps every night on their nocturnal trips down to the beach. It helped them to see clearly, without having to handle a torch. Hannah felt like a very old lady as she descended the staircase with a clumsy awkwardness, feeling certain that in any moment the wind might just blow her off the stairs like a feather, and that she'd end up being fractured on the rocks like a chicken egg. She watched Wendy, nimbly climbing down the staircase ahead of her, with an effortless ease. It helped that in Wendy's early years she had been a gymnast, so Wendy had an enviable sense of balance, while Hannah had always been described by her gym teacher as like a sack of potatoes. Soon they were both standing on the beach, bustard in between the large sculptural shapes of the rocks. They both eagerly threw off their sneakers, enjoying the feel of the cold sand beneath their feet. They both found themselves staring out at the ocean, where the feisty white horses charged towards the shoreline, beating themselves against the rocks that protruded through the water like voluptuous creatures of the deep. The sound of the crashing waves was always soothing to Hannah, and some of the sea spray brushed against her face. If she was sleepy before, the icy spray wiped away the debris of her languid state, and sharpened her senses, so that she was now wide awake, and as sharp as a bird of prey. All of a sudden the aggressive wind died down, as if its truculent mood had finally subsided. There was a chill in the air that bit through the layers of her clothing, but Hannah did not mind. She had experienced worse cold before. Thank God the boisterous wind had been subjugated. In a trice, everything became airily still, and for a brief moment Hannah got the bodeful, disquieting sense that they were not alone. She could feel eyes burrowing into the back of her neck, disturbingly so, and this intrusive eldritch impression sent a spookish chill rushing down her spine. She wondered if Wendy had felt it too, but then again, Wendy seemed blindly incognizant and heedlessly nescient about the haunting feeling that the night invited. Hannah was conspicuously aware many souls had lost their lives very tragically on this vast stretch of coastline, which was a sobering thought. Could some lost soul or ghostly spectre be watching them now? Such a thought would have delighted Hannah in the past, but right now, facing this daunting possibility, was not a thought she gladly welcomed. It would seem her optimistic, sanguine friend was immune to anything that might be remotely negative. But that was Wendy for you. She was the perennial optimistic, apart from anything concerning American politics, of course. She had clearly not noticed a thing on the beach. Wendy audaciously climbed a large rock and perched on it like a gull, staring out at the ocean, her eyes focused steadily on the horizon. She seemed lost in her own world for a moment, as if she'd forgotten that Hannah was even with her. The ethereal moonlight spilled generously over the beach, so that the ambiguous shadowy forms of the rocks were less obscure, and the effulgent silhouette of the moon cast her pearly luminescence over the water, so that it shimmered with a silvery fluorescent glow. It would have been marvellously prepossessing for Hannah if she could only eliminate the bodeful feeling that had taken charge over her body, so that the goosebumps developing over her skin were not this time even remotely related to the nippy weather. She turned around and through narrowing eyes scrutinized her immediate environment, her eyes keenly brushing over the sculptural rocks, the sea sand, and the distant silhouettes of the tall, lofty trees that fringed the furthest edges of the beach. But she saw nothing. Moments later, breaking the silence, came an ecstatic cry from Wendy. "Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God!" Hannah turned her eyes on the horizon, and then she saw, above the ocean, was a steamy layer of thick smoggy mist, and beneath the thick cloudy condensation she could see what appeared to be an ethereal blue mysterious light that was unlike any light she'd ever seen before, with a wistful atmospheric quality that made every hair on her body stand up to attention. As she stood there for a brief moment, time stood still. She almost forgot who she was or where she was, and that she was standing like a frozen statue. She stood there, consumed with wondrous awe, as in abject confoundment she watched this blue light dancing through a smoky white vapour. Chills rippled through her body as she shivered excitedly. She had witnessed the northern lights in Alaska before with her own family, but this was like nothing she'd ever beheld. She knew unequivocally that she was seeing something spectacular, something few have ever seen or will ever see. She knew she was remarkably privileged. The blue light pierced through the mist, and slowly but surely the mist began to recede, and that was when she and Wendy saw the ghost ship, as large white billowing sails, boasting the name the Swanepoel, came into view, and the ship was unlike anything Hannah had ever seen or observed in her life. It was as if she'd stepped back in time to see a ship that had graced the ocean in the days of old, for ships in modern-day America did not look like this. The experience was so mesmerizing that Hannah did not even realize she was holding her breath. The prepossessing ship looked like it was caught up in a frisky storm. The sails were wobbling precariously, and the whole ship was swaggering like an inebriated drunk. And then she heard the thunderous crash as the ship began to jolt and shake. The air was pierced with the disembodied, haunted screams of the men on the ship that had been thrown overboard into the ocean. She could hear their cries for help. The ship gradually began to sink, until it was all but gone. The screams persisted for a while, and then everything went very quiet. She could hardly believe what she had seen, but she turned around to hear these loud, excitable whoops. At first she thought Wendy was making a very curious sound, but to her bewilderment, the whoops did not come from Wendy. Both confounded teenagers turned around to see two huge, ambiguous humanoid creatures dancing under the moonlight, only a few feet away from where they were standing, and both of them were pounding the air with their fists and whooping in delight. These two figures that were tall and lofty, titanic in size, had also witnessed the ghost ship. Hannah's heart did a double skip. She felt the overwhelming need to rub her eyes. She was now certain she was caught up in a fictitious dream. She had to be. This was not really happening. It couldn't be. Hannah realized she was staring at two very large Bigfoot. The Bigfoot, a male and a female, on sensing they were being watched by the two teenagers, turned around to look at the girls, and to Hannah's absolute amazement, the male Bigfoot spoke to her in a curious language that she understood, for reasons she could not explain. But later she was to realize these idiosyncratic creatures have an uncanny, superhuman ability that can transform their language into a comprehensible translation in your heads that can be understood like some automatic download. Only this translation was far more efficient than a computer. Pitakana hosashakilana halina tolapasi hokolosinatila haminakwa. Tonight we have witnessed something very, very great that happens only once every 20 years, the male Bigfoot told them, his gaze fixing on the moon, and then his eyes twinkled as he studied the two teenagers. Hannah was aghast by how human he appeared to be. Dolatinakwa hasantila hobanisakwana holopo. It is a special night indeed, he continued, and you must be special to be invited to share in this ancient wonder. But do not be sad, for the screaming sounds that you heard are souls that died a very long time ago. Makikakwana hasitalakato homasaka. This is an incident recorded on our time-space, never to be forgotten. It shows itself once every 20 years, and you have been privileged to see it, which is why we have celebrated. With that, the two Bigfoots turned around very promptly. She could hear them chattering away excitedly together as they walked down the beach. Kolamakati, hakilakwa, hobati, alakati, olapati nakwasana, hopoto. They were both clearly discussing the very extraordinary event. Hannah wanted to run after them, ask them more questions about the ghost ship, but she just remained rooted to the spot as she stared at her friend in bewilderment. For a while, neither teenager spoke. Finally, Hannah broke the silence and said, "Oh my God! Oh my God! Did that happen? Did that really happen? Not only did we see a ghost ship, we saw 2 Bigfoot, and we saw a ship that you only see every 20 years. But we met 2 Bigfoot on the beach who shared this incongruent, preternatural experience with us. Did that really happen? Tell me it did. Tell me I am not dreaming." Wendy was twinkling like a bright star. Her whole body appeared to be animated. "Are you glad I forced you out of your bed, you lazy cow?" she teased, poking her friend teasingly. "If it wasn't for me, you wouldn't have seen something so spectacular like this." "I wouldn't have missed this for the world," said Hannah. "I still can't believe it. I can't believe this happened. I've got goosebumps all over my skin. Can you see?" "I can. I can't believe it happened either." The 2 teenagers hugged each other, refusing to let go, because this would be a night they would never, ever forget. So there we are. That's the end of part 3. Part 4 is tomorrow night. I look forward to you joining me then. Until next time, goodbye and good night.